Welcome to Lunch with Legacy Leaders, a weekly talk show with local and national thought leaders on issues impacting the Black community. Now introducing our host, Ms. Anne Marie Sorrell.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Lunch with Legacy Leaders. I am your host, Anne Marie Sorrell, President and CEO of the Mosaic Group. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Before we get started with our broadcast today, I would like to thank our sponsors, Florida Power and Light and the Florida Lottery, for making this broadcast possible. Today we have a special guest. We always have a special guest, of course, but today we have a really special guest. I'm super excited to introduce and welcome this young lady. She is our youngest guest to date. She's a native of Miami and a very impressive young lady. So I'd like to welcome Miss Danielle Geathers, and I hope I pronounced her name correctly. She's the president of Massachusetts Institute of Technology Undergraduate Association. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's Geathers, like leathers. Geathers, right?
Yeah, like feathers.
Okay, so like feathers, right? So welcome, Danielle. I'm going to tell a bit about you to our audience. Danielle Geathers, a rising junior and mechanical engineering major at MIT, which is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She is the 2020-2021 student body president, the first Black woman elected as the president of MIT Undergraduate Association. Danielle is a fourth generation native of Miami, Florida. She was the 2018 Silver Knight Award winner, 2018 Miami-Dade County Scholar Athlete of the Year, Coca-Cola Scholar, Foot Locker Scholar, Burger King Scholar, and a WAG Scholar. She is a member of the National Society of Black Engineers, Ron Brown Foundation Captain, MIT Black Student Union, and MIT Black Women's Alliance. Welcome, Danielle. You are so impressive.
Thank you.
Did I leave anything out? I'm sure there's probably more.
No, you covered the bases.
I covered it? Okay, good. Well, I want to just kind of start with your journey. What made you choose MIT?
Yeah, so I think early on, I always was interested in STEM and tinkering in general, so like engineering basics. And then once I found out and really kind of discovered that I wanted to study engineering in college, I kind of looked at like the top schools for engineering, and MIT obviously stood out. And also one other thing that was important in my decision was kind of how collaborative an environment it is. I think at a lot of Ivy Plus schools, it's very competitive. You hear about people in the library all day, and I didn't want a college experience like that. So I loved MIT because it was very friendly and collaborative, and everyone worked on everything together.
Wow. That's, it would have never crossed my mind when I was applying to colleges to think about how collaborative campus is and the organization is. So that's definitely different. Interesting. So what made you run for student body president, and what does it mean to you to be the first Black woman to be elected as MIT student body president in the school's 159-year history?
Yeah, so I'm excited and incredibly humbled to be able to serve my community in this way. As a freshman who came onto campus wanting to help change things, I kind of saw the BSU Black Student Union as a way to do so. And I joined 3 of the 5 committees. I was very passionate about making change there, and I just didn't see student government as a way to get anything done. I ended up joining haphazardly because I had a friend who was in one of the committees and they were looking for freshmen mid-cycle. So I joined that way. And then as I got more involved, I really saw, wow, there's a huge potential for impact. And having had that experience when I was looking to have a potential for impact and I didn't see student government there, I really saw potential for improvement just in terms of how visible our student government was and how inclusive and supportive of the Black community and underrepresented communities in general it could be.
So how did you kind of take us through the process? How did you go from being involved with the Black Student Union Association, then saying, I'm going to reach even higher and I'm going to look at being over our entire student body population? Kind of walk us through your thought process and then the whole process of how you scored the victory to actually make it happen.
Yeah, so came from some people who are very intentional kind of about their recruiting efforts. So we have committees in our student government. So one's called Student Support and Wellness. And they kind of were looking around one day and they were like, wow, we're student support and wellness, but we're not very representative of the student body. So they decided to be really intentional in terms of reaching out to underrepresented student groups to try to recruit members. So I was a member of Black Women's Alliance, and they sent out an email. And as a freshman with extra time on my hands, I was like, oh, okay, like this seems interesting. I care about student support. So I joined the committee, learned more, took on some projects, stood out as a young leader. And then the next year, I was actually appointed to Officer on Diversity. So in that role, I was an officer of the student government, which is like one of the top 7 positions. I was working with administrators, working with different students. I'd led my own committee called Community and Diversity. So that was really when I realized how big an influence student government could have. So kind of coming into this year, only 3 of us were eligible to run because everyone else was graduating. And at first I was very hesitant. I didn't really know if like I was the type of person who should lead the student body. There's so many issues, and I was really, really passionate about the diversity sphere, but like a bunch of other issues on campus that I cared about, but I wasn't like gung-ho, like very policy focused on them. But then I spoke to a lot of people, and they were kind of like, we've never had someone who cared about diversity as much in this position. You could actually make change. So once I kind of changed my mindset around that and saw the kind of potential benefits that could happen from me being in this role, I decided to run. It was a crazy campaign because it was all online because of COVID. So I had to make an Instagram page, a Facebook, Twitter, kind of on Zoom calls 12 hours a day. It was very intense, but I was happy we came out victorious.
Wow. Well, congratulations. So give us an idea of when you talk about diversity and inclusiveness at MIT, give us an idea of the demographic breakdown at MIT.
Yeah, so I think we're technically a minority majority school, even though we're still a predominantly white institution as an institute as a whole. But in terms of Black students, it's about 5%. And Black women is actually less than half of Black students. So we're definitely the minority. But in general, in comparison to like white students versus other underrepresented groups, it's more equal. So in comparison to like a lot of typical state schools in general, we do have more minorities. But in terms of Black students, we're still very low.
Okay. Interesting. So what are your plans as student body president? And so we'll start with there. What are your plans as student body president?
Yeah, definitely a lot of plans. I think a lot of them are surrounding COVID, because that's when I ran. So we ran on unity, authenticity, and equity because we thought those things would be so important, specifically since we were remote at the time and we expected that a lot of us would be remote in the fall. So like I mentioned earlier, our student government just has not been as visible as it should be. If you probably ask anyone at MIT, just randomly picked up a student, I doubt they'd know what the UA is, which is our student government, the undergraduate association. So one of our first goals was, how can you serve people if they don't even know who to talk to when they need something? So really making sure that our Instagram was up to date. We were reaching out to students. Part of the best part of being in student government is you have everyone's email list, right? So it's like called undergrads at, it's very like illustrious. Everyone wants it because you can email students and tell them important updates, but it wasn't being used properly. You can have forums, and get student feedback and amplify their voice, but it just wasn't happening as frequently. So we wanted to be really transparent in our action so people knew what we were working on so they could help inform us. But then also we wanted to hear students who can best advocate their voice to admin. So kind of that visibility, transparency was our first thing. And then just in the diversity, equity, and inclusion sphere, we still celebrate Columbus Day. We want to change that to Indigenous Peoples Day. We actually, MIT just guaranteed $17 million to graduate student fellowships for underrepresented students. So that's going to be big because our grad student diversity has been lagging for a bunch of years. And there's a bunch of other, one of the biggest projects I'm working on now is trying to get MIT to shift some of our cash deposits to a Black-owned bank. So that's an exciting thing.
Wow, that's amazing. And to think, because I don't even know if, putting it in perspective, you know, you're able to have these different changes that you're working on a college campus, and just imagine if that was able to spill over into other campuses. And I want to touch on, you said equity, and that has been, you know, probably one of the major buzzwords over the last several years. As students, and I'm really happy to hear you talk about equity. As students, how are you defining and empowering your fellow students to know the difference between equality and equity?
Yeah, we actually had a good conversation kind of after our financial aid policy was released, like given COVID. So the idea of like looking at all students equally versus like that's not true when it comes to socioeconomic status and kind of how COVID already disproportionately affects students who are in the lower brackets. But then what policies are we doing to provide extra support for these students? So I think it's important, just equality, treating everyone equally, right? If we all don't come with the same background, with the same resources, how, if treating us all the same, giving us the same resources won't like progress us equally kind of at the end. So I think it's really important. I think that's something I'm kind of fighting against, the idea that MIT is a meritocracy. So although maybe your performance once you're at MIT, you're giving enough resources to succeed, and maybe then we can talk about a meritocracy, but the whole meritocracy and admissions just isn't fair when people are coming from different backgrounds and have faced very different obstacles.
Wow. Again, my heart is smiling here. So how can you inspire other students of color at other predominantly white universities and colleges to be engaged in student government on their campuses, and why is that important?
Yeah, honestly, I think this is a movement that started so much longer before me. Yale actually has their first Black student body president. He's still in office. Stanford just elected a Black woman president. I think Brown has a president. Harvard has a Black VP. So I honestly feel really blessed kind of coming into this time when there's so many of my colleagues at these top tier institutions who are Black and leading their governments. It's great. I also think we have a big Black student president group chat with all the HBCUs as well. So I think in general, making sure that we are using our resources as top tier institutions. So one, help our HBCUs, fellow colleagues, but then also help students everywhere. So I think as part of being Black students in PWIs, like it's a really heavy burden to kind of like push for change. And I kind of also want to like emphasize that you don't always have to be the one fighting to improve your institution. I think part of what's really powerful about student government is even if I'm a Black leader, like my student government still isn't like the BSU, you know, we can support the BSU and we can kind of talk to admin and help enforce those efforts. But I think one of the powerful nature of being part of student government is kind of being able to give that extra boost. You're not expected to fight in diversity. So when you do, it's even more powerful.
Absolutely. Well, definitely keep up the good fight. I want to switch gears to STEM. Mm-hmm. And, you know, engineering is one of those careers that, you know, no matter if it's electrical, mechanical, civil engineering, and so on and so forth, there's always going to be a need for engineers. And it's so great to see that you've chosen a career in STEM. And there's a lot of push around STEM, especially among students of color. There's a lack of women in STEM. There's a lack of women of color in STEM. And there's definitely a lack of just people of color in STEM as a whole. And so what I want to ask you is, do you see a shift happening among your peers, being more career focused on STEM careers? And what advice can you offer parents and middle and high school students regarding careers in STEM?
Yeah, so I do think this should happen kind of long before me as well. The problems we're seeing today in terms of representation, kind of like in C-suite executives and kind of the top of the companies. I think there's a lot of graphics about Silicon Valley and kind of the top execs, how diverse they are, but there's so many Black women engineers out there, specifically in kind of the mid and lower tiers of the companies. And the problem is kind of promotion, which we all know is so biased and so laced with prejudice in general. So I think I'm happy to see Black women entering engineering fields, but in general, honestly, at MIT, it's kind of been standard over the past decade, which is very surprising and something I'm actually even fighting against. It's kind of stagnated and almost lowered in terms of Black women recruitment. So I think just in general, now we're kind of getting into the sphere where STEM is robotics, right? STEM is coding. And I think as someone who doesn't personally like coding, I think it's also really important that we understand that STEM has so many applications. Like right now I'm working in consumer products, and like that's what's passionate about me, kind of what engineering goes into everyday products you use. And I think part of the problem with STEM is, although it's really great that we're getting exposure out there, it's kind of getting siloed into one very niche point of STEM that we broadcast to everyone, versus STEM literally goes into everything, into lights, into what makeup you're using, into what hair products you're using. And I think if we're able to translate that and really bring it home to people, we'll get so much more diversity.
Well, I think you are creating a platform to do that, and I like the fact that you do emphasize that STEM spans so much further than coding and robotics and chemists, but it's so many other things. It's every part of our day-to-day lives, and I think that parents and students definitely need to hear more of that. So I hope that, as you're home and you're able to, once school starts back up and, we'll still be virtual for a while, I can probably predict that, that maybe you'll be able to speak to other young ladies. And I would actually love to invite you to do a virtual talk with my organization, Girls to Women, who are middle and high school girls, to just kind of talk to them and encourage them about your career path. So thank you for bringing that to light as well. So tell us about your community involvement outside of your college campus. You already have a lot, I'm sure, so I don't even know if you have time to engage outside of college campus, but if you do, what do you get involved in?
Yeah, I think I was able to do a community service project before I went to college, and that's kind of my passion. I think that's one thing that kind of helped differentiate me in the application process. So personally, I played soccer my whole life. I was recruited to MIT. I played my freshman year, and one thing I also loved STEM growing up. So one thing I was able to do was go to a local park. Football's huge in Miami. I think Miami still has the most NFL recruits if you go by city. So I was able to go to a local park where there was kind of all these young boys, lots of Black boys who were passionate about football, and I was able to kind of translate the importance of STEM to sports. So using ESPN sports science videos, I would show them a video, then we would talk about it, and we would do little math or science worksheets, then we would do hands-on activities. So that was kind of my favorite project that I've ever done, and I'm really excited to see how I can go back, hopefully when COVID's over, and they're back at camp, to really go over STEM, because it's kind of bringing it back home. I think sports, I love sports. I saw Ice Princess, where she uses physics to figure out how to twirl better, and I think it's so important being a soccer player, understanding angles and kind of spin in general, and it's even more important for football when we're talking about collisions and momentum. So I think if we're really able to bring that back home, it could really influence the future of STEM and diversity.
Nice. So we've seen an uptick in young people standing up for various issues. I love the fact that you're already, standing up and working for equity and diversity and inclusion. But there are other issues, mass shootings and gun violence. As we saw that after Parkland, students really, from high school on up to college, really came out and just really stood in the paint for that cause, and still is, fighting a good fight. Police brutality, systemic racism, the protests have been largely led by young people, your generation. Is this engagement just a moment in time when it's popular and newsworthy, or are you all in it for the long-term effect and change?
Yeah, it's a movement, not a moment. I think in general, my generation has been really big of using social media to promote that change. And one thing I think is good about social media is, in general, it stays there. So if I go to somebody's page, I kind of see all the pictures and kind of the ability to spread awareness on issues. On Instagram, you can post stories, and a lot of people have been resharing very good awareness posts. So I think even today, I can go up and I'll see 50 stories about things I've never heard of, just in terms of international injustice and kind of these facts and figures that you don't understand that really emphasize kind of the need for action. And I think even if it simmers down and is not at the same level that it was specifically right after the murder of George Floyd, and kind of the larger national conversation, people are still listening, people are still creating content, people still care about it more than has kind of been a conversation specifically around youth in the past. So I think one really big thing that will promote this being a movement is the idea of people really reflecting, specifically non-Black people, thinking about what's in their mind and their prejudice. I think a lot of us, specifically in the corporate world now are kind of seeing like our bosses and our whole community having these conversations around race, which seems like they've never happened before at this level. And I think that will kind of be the big change, having like non-Black allies in this fight.
Absolutely. Now, will your generation take this fight to the polls and get out the vote?
I definitely do think so. I think last election I couldn't vote, but I think in general a lot of people saw it as an economic kind of vote. Specifically coming from a predominantly white private high school, I think there was a lot of conversations about like the economy versus like morals. And I think now than ever, people are actually seeing the effect that who you have in the presidency can rain down just on everyone mentally and emotionally. So I definitely think there's a sense of urgency now that wasn't there in 2016 that will really push the vote forward for young people in general.
Definitely. Well, I definitely hope that we see a big uptick in voter registration from young people, getting to the polls, not just on the general election, but even looking at your state and local elections. You guys have the ability to still continue to follow issues that are, happening back in your home states and your home cities. And you can vote by mail on those issues and on those candidates as well. So we definitely encourage you and your peers to be a part of the process, in addition to, protests and being a voice on social media, which is also necessary, and also engaging, creating those conversations with our allies, our non-Black allies as well. So I think it's so important that you all definitely, take a holistic approach. It's really, I hate to say it, but it's really your generation that's going to continue to solve some of these issues that we have today.
Yeah, really good. Also about social media, I really understand how assistant district attorneys are kind of how that process works and how important it is who you vote for, specifically in judge races, and kind of the lack of diversity in judges in general is a big target that I've kind of heard students talk about more.
And well, leading into that leads me to my next question, because I think what's important for those of us who are out here working with policymakers, legislators, or running for office, what are the issues that are important to your generation?
Ooh. I think just in general, I don't think it's that much different from kind of Gen Z, millennials. Millennials is not that different from millennials. I think specifically now, kind of what you hear for is that focus on equity, like we mentioned earlier, and kind of how proactive you want to be about making change. I think now, kind of with the whole Bernie movement and kind of that pushing, like AOC, Ayanna Pressley, we really want to see people who want to be bold about change and are willing to move the needle. I think we've heard for a long time, oh, we need to wait. Oh, like calm down, wait. And I think now, if anything I can say for my generation is we want things to change pretty quickly.
Good. So do you have any political aspirations, local, state, national, in the future?
I honestly had no aspiration to run for president until about 4 months before either. So you never know. I think I'm very interested in trying to figure out the best way to help my community at any time possible. So I'm not going to close the door on that. But I think in general, my goal has been to be a patent lawyer for a long time. So I'm kind of mostly interested in that field right now.
Oh, awesome. Well, I know a couple of them that I can definitely send your way as far as mentorship. Well, definitely. As a community, what can we do to support you, students like yourself? What can we do to make sure that you're successful at the things you're doing on your campus, as well as, what you're doing, back in your community back home? How can we as a community be a support system for you?
Yeah, I think it kind of to connect us with other people and growing us that way. I think honestly, networking has been so big for me in particular, and I think that's something else that kind of counts against underrepresented communities. We don't have the same amount of representation, and just in general people's unconscious bias probably affects us more than other groups. So I think if successful Black people specifically, and then in general underrepresented professionals, can help connect young people, that'll be so great, and kind of really help like that whole lifting as we climb mentality is really important.
Absolutely. Well, I'll definitely do my part. What's the key as we wind down? We have a few minutes left. What are some key takeaways that you want to leave with our audience? We have different professionals that are listening. We have parents that are listening. We have young people that the parents have made them tune in to listen to you. What key takeaways do you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, I think in general, it's very hard for specifically my generation. I've heard a lot from students in predominantly white high schools in general who kind of feel very alienated at their schools, and then also kind of this balance of activism with mental health and self-care. So I would really say to like check in on Black students in general. I've seen kind of a lot of like high rates of depression in general and kind of that stress. And this is summer, so I don't even know what the school year will look like. So I think really emphasizing the need for self-care, self-love, and like taking mental breaks. I think social media is great because you can find out about things, but it's also addictive and it's kind of a constant cycle of possibly trauma. So also just encouraging young students to unplug and to take a break, and that although the fight will be carried by them, it doesn't only have to be on them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience before we conclude?
No, I don't think so. Just in general, I think it's important that all of us are really supportive in this time and kind of stay away from divisive attitudes and just make sure that we're connecting.
Absolutely. Well, very good. I am so proud of you. I'm so happy to have had the opportunity to meet you virtually. I look forward to following your career. I think you have an amazingly bright future. I look forward to you continue to inspire and motivate and empower other students and your peers, not just in STEM, not just on your campus, but around the country and around the world, because you've had many major appearances and interviews, and I just want you to keep that up and just know that you do have a community here in South Florida that supports you, and we would do whatever we can. I'll definitely reach out to you offline to get you that patent attorney that you can reach out to. She's a good friend of mine. And then whatever other resources that we're able to extend to you, please do not hesitate to contact us at Legacy or myself at the Mosaic Group or any other community members. We have several people that have commented on this post, so make sure you go back and watch it as well. And thank you so much for tuning in. We're just going to do a couple of quick announcements. I want everybody, please continue to follow this young lady, lift her up in prayer. And let's be a supportive community around her and other young people in our community that's doing amazing work. And that's just doing a really good job. Be sure to check out our political issue of Legacy Magazine at miamediagroup.com. Elections, our August elections is only 1 month away. Actually, it's less than 1 month away, August 18th. You should all have your vote by mail ballots by now. So please make sure that you are completing your ballots. Make sure that you sign them properly and return them on or before August 18th. You want to learn about your South Florida candidates, again, miamediagroup.com. Also, the November elections will be coming up. So right after August, we have the November elections. You can still request your vote by mail ballot for both elections. The 40 under 40 issue will drop on August 12th. Can't wait to see our 40 young professionals in Miami and our 40 young professionals South Florida for Palm Beach and Broward County. So make sure you check that out on August 12th. It will be sent out in the distributed in the Miami Herald as well as the Sun Sentinel, and it will also be available online at miamediagroup.com. Next week, we will be joined by Mr. Rick Beasley, the Executive Director of Career Source South Florida. Can't wait to talk to him because I'm sure there's a lot going on with our workforce, especially in the middle of this pandemic. So be sure to check us out next week. And please share this video, especially if you have young people at home or if you mentor young people or if you're an educator, share this video so that they can be inspired by Miss Danielle Geathers. She has been amazing. Thank you so much again for joining us, Danielle. Share this video, add Lunch with Legacy Leaders to your calendar, and tune in with us next Thursday at noon.